She had worn the pale blue gown he once said brought out her eyes, but he never looked at her. Not really. Not the way a husband should. And tonight, at the grand harvest ball in their own estate of Thornwood Hall, she finally understood why. The ballroom shimmered with candlelight and the soft rustle of silk. Alara, Duchess of Ashford, stood near the terrace doors, a glass of champagne turning warm in her trembling fingers. Her husband, Alexander, the Duke of Ashford, stood barely 10 feet away with his back half-turned toward her, speaking in low, intimate tones to the elegant Lady Margaret Vane. Alara had not meant to eavesdrop. She had simply paused there, hopping for a glance, a small acknowledgement after 3 months of icy distance. Instead, she heard Lady Margaret's silken laugh, and then her husband's voice. "Your Grace, people wonder why you married her," Lady Margaret purred. "She's lovely, yes, but her family brought nothing but debt and disgrace." Alexander's reply came without hesitation, flat and weary. The marriage was a transaction, nothing more. The duchy required certain lands and her father required salvation. Love was never part of the arrangement. The words did not crash over Alara like a wave. They seeped in slowly, a cold poison spreading from her chest to the tips of her fingers. She had always suspected. She had always feared. But to hear it spoken aloud in his calm, measured voice with that dismissive finality undid something deep inside her. She set the glass down carefully on a passing tray, her face perfectly composed. She did not cry. She did not flee. She simply walked out of the ballroom, through the grand corridors of her home, and into the quiet darkness of the garden. Only there, with the scent of autumn roses around her and no one to see, did she press a hand to her mouth and let the silent tears fall. She had been waiting for love that was never meant to exist. Alara had come to Thornwood Hall 2 years earlier as a bride of convenience. Her father, Viscount Hartwell, had gambled away the family fortune and left them teetering on the edge of ruin. When the powerful Duke of Ashford made an unexpected offer for her hand, it had seemed like a miracle. She had been 21, hopeful, secretly thrilled to marry the man whose dark eyes and quiet strength she had admired from afar at 2 distant London seasons. On their wedding day, he had been courteous but remote. He had placed the ring on her finger with hands that did not tremble. He had recited his vows without warmth. That night, he had come to her chambers only to explain with stiff formality that theirs was a union of mutual benefit and that he would not demand anything she was unwilling to give. She had misunderstood then. She had thought he was being kind, giving her time. She had not realized he was building a wall that would never come down. For the first year, Alara tried. She tried with a quiet desperation that embarrassed her now. She learned his favorite dishes and asked the cook to prepare them. She lingered in the library at hours he usually read, hopping for conversation. She wore the colors his housekeeper hinted he liked. She asked gentle questions about his day, his business, his boyhood. He answered in monosyllables. He never asked a single question in return. He never once sought her out. She might have endured that polite distance forever if not for the small cruelties. The way he would fall silent when she entered a room. The way he never introduced her as anything but the Duchess. The way his mother, the Dowager, looked at her with thinly veiled pity. The servants noticed. Society noticed. And now Lady Margaret, with her perfect coiffure and knowing smile, had been given the truth Alara had never wanted to hear. A transaction. Love was never part of the arrangement. That night, lying alone in the vast bedchamber she occupied at the opposite end of the gallery from his, Alara made a quiet decision. She would stop waiting. She would stop hopping. She would be the perfect duchess in every outward way, and she would close the door on her foolish heart. The change began the next morning. At breakfast, Alexander sat at the head of the long mahogany table, reading correspondence. Alara entered, wished him a calm good morning, and took her seat far down the table without once glancing his way. She ate quietly, then informed him in a courteous tone that she would be visiting the tenant farms to review the harvest reports. He looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. She had never before announced plans without first seeking his approval. "That is not necessary," he said, lowering his letter. "The steward can manage it." "I am sure he can," Alara replied, rising gracefully. "But as Duchess of Ashford, I find I would like to understand the estate myself. Good day, your grace." She left him staring after her, a faint crease between his brows. In the weeks that followed, Alara transformed her daily life. She no longer drifted through the halls like a ghost waiting to be noticed. She rose early, rode out to the villages, spoke with farmers and merchants, and learned the intricate workings of the land that now bore her title. She organized a small fund to repair the roofs of widowed tenants. She visited the sick with baskets of food and medicine, her hands soft but unafraid. She began instructing a group of village girls in reading and sums, meeting with them twice a week in the parish hall. The people of Ashford began to love their quiet duchess. They spoke of her kindness, her gentle dignity. The servants, who had long pitied her, now looked at her with genuine respect. And Alexander began to notice that something had shifted. At first he could not name it. Then one evening, as he sat in the library with a brandy, he realized what it was: the silence. Alara no longer paused at the library door hopping for an invitation. She no longer asked about his day. She did not linger after dinner in the drawing room, waiting for a conversation he never offered. She was simply gone, not physically. She was present at meals, composed and polite. But the eager, hopeful light in her eyes had been extinguished. He found the realization unsettling in a way he did not wish to examine. Autumn deepened, and with it came the annual Ashford Charity Auction, a grand affair held in the estate's great hall. Alara had thrown herself into the preparations, working closely with the local vicar and a young architect named Lord Nicholas Trelawney, who was overseeing the restoration of the village orphanage. Nicholas was everything Alexander was not. He was warm, quick to smile, and openly admiring of Alara's intelligence and compassion. He walked beside her through the market stalls, his head bent attentively, his laughter ringing out at her quiet wit. When he looked at her, his eyes held no transaction. They held genuine interest. The night of the auction. Thornwood Hall blazed with light and music. Alara wore a gown of deep forest green that made her chestnut hair glow, and her hazel eyes seemed lit from within. She moved through the crowd with an ease that Alexander had never seen, greeting guests, directing servants, ensuring everything ran smoothly. He watched her from across the room, a strange tightness gathering in his chest. Nicholas Trelawney was at her side, his hand hovering at the small of her back, never quite touching but always there. Alexander saw the man lean down and murmur something in her ear. Alara smiled, a true smile, soft and unguarded, the kind she had never once directed at him. Jealousy struck Alexander like a physical blow. It was ugly and shocking and completely unexpected. He had no right to it, and that made it worse. He had not earned her smiles. He had not asked for her warmth. And now, seeing another man basking in it, he felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Lady Margaret appeared at his elbow, her perfume cloying. "Your Grace, you seem distracted. Surely you are not worried about your little wife. Lord Trelawney is perfectly harmless." Alexander turned a cold stare on her. "The Duchess's friendships are not your concern, Lady Margaret, nor are they a subject for idle gossip." Margaret's smile faltered and she retreated with a murmured apology, but Alexander hardly noticed. His attention had returned to Alara, who was now laughing at something Nicholas had said, her cheeks flushed with pleasure. The sight hollowed him out. Later that night, long after the guests had departed, Alexander found himself standing in the gallery that separated his chambers from hers. He had never crossed that distance without purpose. Now he stood in the darkness, staring at her closed door, fighting the impulse to knock, to demand she explain why she had stopped looking at him. He did not knock. He did not demand. He simply stood there, a man slowly realizing he had thrown away the one thing he never knew he wanted. Winter arrived, and with it a letter that changed everything. Alara had been writing to her younger sister, who was staying with an aunt in Bath, when a sealed note arrived from her father's old solicitor. She opened it with mild curiosity and felt the blood drain from her face as she read. The letter revealed a truth that had been buried for years. Before Alexander's proposal, her father had been in secret negotiations with Lord Percival Blackwood, a man whose reputation for cruelty was whispered behind closed doors. Blackwood had offered to pay off the family debts in exchange for Alara's hand, and her father, in desperation, had been on the verge of agreeing. The marriage would have been a nightmare. Blackwood's previous wife had died under suspicious circumstances, and society had long suspected violence. Then, without warning, the Duke of Ashford had intervened. He had offered a larger sum, cleared the debts entirely, and asked for Alara's hand in a matter of days. The solicitor, now on his deathbed and wishing to clear his conscience, wrote that the Duke had acted not out of political ambition, but to save Alara from a terrible fate. He had requested that the truth never be spoken, so that she would not feel bound by gratitude. Alara read the letter 3 times, her hands shaking. Alexander had not married her for land. He had married her to protect her. He had sacrificed his own freedom, tied himself to a woman he did not love, to shield her from a monster. Her heart, which she had so carefully numbed, cracked open with a flood of confusion and fragile hope. She did not know what to feel. Gratitude, yes, but also a deep, aching sorrow, because he had never told her. He had let her believe she was unwanted, a burden, a transaction. He had stood silent while she withered, and she could not understand why. She confronted him that very evening. She found him in the library, seated before the fire with a book he was not reading. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered in his dark eyes. Perhaps it was alarm at her expression, pale and resolute, the letter clutched in her hand. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice low but steady. "Did you marry me to save me from Lord Blackwood?" The silence stretched until it felt like glass about to shatter. Alexander closed the book slowly and set it aside. He did not ask how she knew. He simply nodded once. "Yes." "Why?" The word broke from her, full of pain. "Why would you do such a thing and never speak of it? Why let me believe I was nothing but a duty?" He rose, and for the first time she saw his composure crack. His jaw tightened, and his hands curled at his sides. "Because I did not want your gratitude," he said, his voice rough. "I did not want you to feel obligated to love a man you had not chosen. You were so full of life, Alara. I thought if I gave you freedom within this marriage, if I did not burden you with the truth, you might eventually find some contentment." "Contentment?" She shook her head, tears spilling over. "You gave me silence. You gave me coldness. I thought you despised me. I waited for a single kind word, a single sign you saw me as more than a piece of furniture, and you gave me nothing. How could that ever lead to contentment?" He flinched as if she had struck him. "I thought distance was safer, for both of us." "Safer," she repeated bitterly. "You were afraid, not of protecting me, but of feeling something yourself." He did not deny it. The firelight carved shadows across his face, and she saw in his eyes the truth he had buried for so long. He had been a coward, a proud, wounded coward who had chosen silence over vulnerability. Alara set the letter on the table between them. "I stopped waiting for you, Alexander. I stopped hopping, and now I do not know if there is anything left to save." She turned and walked away, leaving him alone with the weight of his silence. Something broke in Alexander that night. He did not sleep. He sat in the library until dawn, staring at the letter, replaying every moment of the past 2 years. He saw himself through her eyes, a cold, remote figure who had withheld every scrap of affection. He thought of the first time she had tried to talk to him about his mother's garden, and how he had given a one-word answer and walked away. He remembered the dinner where she had worn the blue gown and he had not even complimented her. He had noticed it, though. He had noticed everything and said nothing. He had thought his restraint was noble. It had been nothing but cruelty dressed in fine manners. Fear had ruled him. Fear of losing someone he loved, as he had lost his parents to fever when he was a boy. Fear of being vulnerable. And so he had pushed away the one person who might have brought him back to life. The next day he sought her out. She was in the morning room, writing correspondence for the orphanage project. She looked up with wary eyes when he entered. "Ilara," he said, and his voice was hoarse, as if he had not used it in years. "May I speak with you?" She nodded slowly, setting down her pen. He did not sit. He stood before her like a man awaiting judgment. "I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, I know that, but I need you to understand one thing." He paused, his chest rising and falling with the effort of the words. "I did not marry you only to save you. I had seen you before, 2 years earlier at the Bramwell Garden party. You were standing by the fountain, laughing at something your friend said, and the sunlight caught your hair. You were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen." Ilara's breath caught. "I told myself it was a passing fancy," he continued, his voice strained. "But when I heard what your father intended, what Blackwood meant to do, I could not breathe. I could not let it happen. I told myself I was acting out of duty, out of honor. But it was never just duty. It was you. It was always you." She stared at him, her eyes shimmering. "Then why? Why the silence, the coldness? If you felt anything at all, why did you lock me out?" He drew a shaky breath. "Because I was terrified that if I let myself love you, I would lose you, that you would never love me in return, that you would wake up one day and realize you had been bartered away and would resent me forever. So I built a fortress, and I left you outside in the cold." His voice cracked. "I am so sorry, Ilara. I have been a fool, a blind, arrogant fool." She rose from her chair, her hands pressed together to keep them from trembling. "You let me break, Alexander. You let me believe I was invisible." "I know." His eyes glistened. "And I will spend the rest of my life trying to undo that harm if you will let me. If there is even a shred of that hope you once had left, I will protect it with everything I have." She turned away, walking to the window, her back to him. The silence was unbearable. He did not move, did not breathe, waiting for his sentence. At last she spoke, her voice soft and thick with tears. "There is a part of me that still loves you. I do not know how to kill it. I tried and I failed." She turned to face him. "But I cannot go back to the way things were. I cannot be invisible again." "You will never be invisible again," he said fiercely. "I see you, Ilara. I see everything you are, everything you have done for this place, for these people. And I swear to you, from this moment forward you will know it, every day." He reached into his waistcoat pocket and withdrew a small, frayed ribbon of pale lavender silk. He held it out, his hand unsteady. "I have carried this since the day we met. You dropped it as you walked past me in the garden. I picked it up and kept it. I have kept it for 4 years. That is the truth of what you have always meant to me." Ilara looked at the ribbon and a sob escaped her. She recognized it, a forgotten piece of a gown she had worn in another life. She reached out and took it, her fingers brushing his. That small touch sent a tremor through them both. "Alexander," she whispered. He closed his eyes as if her voice was a benediction. "I am here, I am listening, for as long as you will have me." Healing was not instant. Trust, once shattered, does not mend overnight. But Alexander kept his word. In the days and weeks that followed, he showed her in 100 small ways that he saw her. He asked her opinion on estate matters and truly listened. He accompanied her to the village and stood quietly while she spoke with the tenants, a look of quiet pride on his face. He left flowers on her writing desk with notes written in his own hand, short and sincere. He began to share pieces of his own past, his fears, his memories of lonely boyhood. He let her see the man beneath the duke. And Ilara slowly, tentatively allowed herself to hope again. She did not rush back into his arms. She guarded her heart carefully, but she stopped turning away when he entered a room. She began to smile at him, small, cautious smiles that made his breath catch. One evening, as they walked through the frost-kissed garden, she slipped her hand into his. He held it as if it were made of glass, his thumb brushing her knuckles with a tenderness that made her eyes sting. Nicholas Trelawney, upon seeing the change between them, bowed gracefully and withdrew his attentions. He told Alara with genuine kindness that he was happy for her. Alexander felt a surge of gratitude and more than a little shame for his earlier jealousy. The true test came in early spring, when Lord Blackwood, emboldened by years of impunity, made an unexpected appearance at a neighboring estate. Word reached Thornwood Hall that he had been asking about the Duchess, his old claim. Alexander's reaction was immediate and fierce. He did not rage or bluster. He simply issued a cold, precise warning through his solicitor. If Blackwood came anywhere near Alara, the Duke would personally see him ruined and prosecuted for the suspicious death of his first wife, a matter Alexander had quietly investigated for months. Alara learned of this protection secondhand, and when she confronted him, he simply said, "No one will ever threaten you again, not while I breathe." That night she went to his study and found him staring out the window, his shoulders tight with tension. She crossed the room and placed her hand on his back. He turned, and she saw the raw fear behind his composure. "I cannot lose you now," he said, his voice breaking. "Not when I have only just learned how to love you." She stepped into his embrace, her arms winding around his neck. "You will not lose me, Alexander. I am here. I am staying." He buried his face in her hair and held her as if she were the anchor in a storm. When he finally pulled back to look at her, his eyes were wet. "I love you, Alara. I have loved you for so long I forgot what it felt like not to love you. I was too late to say it, but I will say it every day for the rest of my life." She touched his cheek, her own tears falling. "You were late, but you are here now, and that is all that matters." Spring bloomed over Thornwood Hall, softening the ancient stone and filling the gardens with color. The estate that had once felt like a gilded cage now felt like a home. Alara and Alexander walked together through the orchard on the morning of their third wedding anniversary, the air sweet with apple blossoms. She still carried the lavender ribbon, now tucked into a locket he had given her. He carried a new lightness in his step and a warmth in his eyes that servants and tenants marveled at. They sat on a stone bench beneath a canopy of white petals, and she leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do you remember what you said to Lady Margaret that night?" she asked quietly, no longer with pain, but with the gentle clarity of a wound fully healed. He closed his eyes and groaned. "I will regret those words until my dying day." I was trying to deflect her, to avoid giving her any ammunition. I thought I was protecting our privacy. Instead, I drove a knife into your heart. "You did," she agreed softly, "but you also pulled it out and helped me heal. That matters more." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt your place in my heart. You are not a transaction. You are my miracle." She lifted her face and smiled, a full, radiant smile that no longer held shadows. "And you are mine." In the warm hush of the orchard, with the world waking around them, they sat together, two people who had journeyed through pain, distance, jealousy, and regret, and had finally found their way to a love that was not too late after all. It was exactly on time.